My parents refused to come to my son's art exhibit, saying it was a waste of time. I showed up anyway. While there, I overheard my sister tell a guest, "No real talent in that bloodline." I silently unveiled the award sponsor's name, me. The winner? My son. The shame? Theirs. I'm Renee Wilcox, 42, divorced mom from Albany, New York. My younger sister Sybil always fits. Straight teeth, straight as, perfectly straight hair. She made everything look effortless, and made sure everyone else knew it. I was the artsy one. The one who wrote poems instead of studying biology, who painted in the garage instead of going to soccer practice. That meant I was the one they tolerated. I thought things might change when I got older, got married, had my son. For a while, it felt like maybe I had carved out a little piece. Nathaniel, my ex-husband, was charming, warm, and full of humor. He had this way of deflecting my parents' snide remarks or twisting Sybil's jabs into jokes so smooth that even she had to laugh. With him around, the holidays were easier. He was a buffer. A softener. When we split, amicably, mostly due to life pulling us in different directions, I didn't just lose a partner. I lost that shield. And Dylan? My sweet, strange Dylan. He's 14 now, but even as a toddler, he saw the world differently. When other kids were building towers with blocks, he was arranging them by shade and size. By age 7, he was sketching entire landscapes from memory. By 10, he was mixing his own paints. I knew I had something rare in him, not just talent, but a sensitivity that made his work feel alive. I protected that. I nurtured it. My family never cared. They'd pat him on the head, call his art cute, then change the subject to college admissions and retirement plans. One Thanksgiving, when Dylan brought his sketchpad to the table and proudly showed my father a drawing he'd made of their backyard, my dad glanced at it, grunted, and said, "Is that a raccoon or a dog?" It was neither. It was a fox, beautifully done in charcoal, but I saw Dylan's face fall. That was the last time he ever brought a sketch to family dinner. Still, I tried. I always tried. I sent them invites when he won awards, mailed them his little write-ups from school, sent pictures. Rarely did I get anything more than a half-hearted "that's nice" or a comment like, "maybe he'll grow out of this art phase." The final straw came when Dylan got accepted into the Albany Youth Art Collective, a group that showcases standout young talent from across the state. It wasn't just another school hallway display. This was a jury. Curated. Real artists from the community would be there. And Dylan? He'd spent 6 months perfecting his piece. A haunting pastel titled Winter Mouth. He told me once, in his soft, awkward way, that it was about how it feels to have something to say and no one listening. I sent out invites to the whole family. I even called. Sybil picked up, and when I told her about the exhibit, she said, "I'll try, but we've got a fundraiser that night for Isla's violin group." My mom didn't answer. Dad texted back 2 days later, "Sounds fun. Probably can't make it." Sounds fun. Probably can't make it. That was the response to the biggest night of my son's young life. I was hurt. But not shocked. I didn't even tell Dylan what they said. I just ironed his shirt, bought him new dress shoes, and told him I was proud of him. That I would be there, front and center. Because I would be. Even if I was the only one clapping. But that's not the whole story. Because 2 months before the exhibit, I'd done something they didn't know about. I'd reached out to the program director of the collective and asked if there was a way to sponsor an award. A real one. A mentorship opportunity paired with a scholarship, not huge, but meaningful. The program was thrilling. They'd had donors before, but I asked for 2 things in return. 1, name it after my grandmother, Elizabeth Rainford, who used to sketch on napkins while chain-smoking Parliament lights, and 2, keep my name private until the winner was announced. I didn't tell Dylan. I didn't want him to expect anything. I just wanted him to be judged fairly, and if he won, to know it was real. I would fund it either way. The night of the exhibit, the Albany Institute was glowing. It was one of those rare, crisp spring evenings when the chill felt clean and the sky was still light at 7 p.m. I held Dylan's hand as we walked in, though he let go quickly. He's too old for that now, he thinks. His piece was displayed near the center of the gallery. Winter Mouth. It stopped people. Not because it was pretty, because it was something you felt. A faceless figure surrounded by whites and grays, a snow-covered forest behind it, and a single crimson scarf across the chest. It was the kind of image that made people uncomfortable, and that made them stare longer. I was proud. So proud I had to walk away at times just to avoid crying. That's when I saw her. Sybil. She was in the far corner, wearing a tailored wool coat that probably cost more than my car note. Her daughter Isla stood beside her, clutching a violin case even though this wasn't a music event. Sybil hadn't seen me yet. I should have walked away. But I didn't. I inched closer, just in time to catch her talking to a couple, friends of hers, clearly. She gestured toward Dylan's piece and gave a low, almost bored chuckle. That one? It's my nephew's. No real talent in that bloodline. My sister was always artistic. You know what that means. I felt my blood go cold. She went on. It's fine for a hobby, I guess. He's a sweet kid, but let's be honest, it's not like this stuff leads anywhere. I didn't confront her. I didn't throw a drink or cause a scene. I just smiled, turned away, and waited. Because I knew what was coming. When the awards were announced, Dylan didn't win one of the technical prizes. I saw his disappointment, how he shrunk a little in his shoes. But then came the final award. The Elizabeth Rainford Mentorship Award, the host announced, goes to a young artist whose work moved all of us. A piece that felt raw, emotional, and brave. The winner is Dylan Wilcox, for Winter Mouth. The applause felt like thunder. I looked at Sybil as Dylan walked to the stage. Her face was blank. Then, as if the cherry on top had been scheduled for perfect effect, the screen behind the podium changed. Sponsored by Renee Wilcox. She saw it. She saw me. Her eyes locked with mine, just for a second. I didn't say a word. I just nodded, slowly. She said nothing. But her silence? That was the best apology I never asked for. Dylan stood frozen for a second as his name echoed across the gallery walls. The clapping grew louder, and a few people even whistled. It jolted him into motion. He looked back at me once, searching, as if to check this wasn't some elaborate joke. I nodded with everything I had in me. He walked toward the podium, shoulders squared, eyes wide. He shook the host's hand and accepted the certificate and envelope. His lips curled up just slightly in that barely there smile he reserved only for moments when he didn't know how else to process joy. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but instead, I stood there feeling something unfamiliar, vindication. Not for the award itself, but for every ignored call, every brushed-off invitation, every lukewarm "how's Dylan doing these days?" from people who should have been his cheerleaders. This was for every time my parents spoke over him like he wasn't in the room. For every drawing that was met with "that's nice, dear," and then tossed aside like junk mail. And for once, Dylan felt it too. I could see it in his eyes. He didn't just win something, he had been seen. And when you've spent your entire childhood being quietly brilliant in the shadows, being seen is the biggest prize of all. I scanned the room again. My parents weren't there. Of course, they weren't. Sybil was still near the back, standing rigid. Her daughter whispered something, and Sybil replied without taking her eyes off the screen that still had my name on it. It wasn't dramatic. No scene, no confrontation. But her hands clenched around the strap of her designer purse, and that, for me, was enough. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is the kind that doesn't need an audience. Just the truth, delivered plainly, wrapped in success. People began milling around after the ceremony. Parents took photos. A few curators approached Dylan to compliment his work. One asked me if I'd consider entering his piece in a regional gallery circuit. I almost laughed from the sheer joy of it. Sybil didn't approach. But Isla did. She came over cautiously, like someone approaching a stray cat. She looked at me, then at Dylan, who was now surrounded by other kids and a few adults. Her voice was almost too soft to hear. "He's really good," she said. I raised an eyebrow, surprised. "He is. Mom's just weird about things she doesn't understand." I blinked, a little stunned by her honesty. She gave me a half shrug. I liked the scarf in the painting. It felt like, I don't know. Like it meant something. "It did," I said. She nodded, awkwardly, then glanced back toward her mother. "I should go." I nodded too. "Thanks for saying that." She disappeared into the crowd. I didn't follow her gaze, but I knew Sybil saw the exchange. That was her daughter seeing value in something she'd already dismissed. Another small win. Dylan and I took a walk after the exhibit. He didn't want to go straight home, and neither did I. The Albany night was chilly, but spring had left a softness in the air. We walked up Washington Avenue in silence for a bit, passing the old shops and late-night cafes, glowing warmly through their windows. "Why do you think they didn't come?" Dylan finally asked, his voice small. I stopped walking. "Because they don't know how to appreciate things they can't control." He nodded, as if that somehow made sense to him. "You did amazing," I added. "That award, those people, you earned every bit of it. You didn't need them there to prove anything." He looked up at me. "I know." And he did. I could tell. Back at home, we sat on the couch and watched half a movie before he fell asleep on my shoulder. I let him sleep there for a long time. Maybe it was because I knew how fast he was growing. Or maybe because, in that moment, I didn't just feel like a mother, I felt like someone who'd finally done something right. The next morning, I posted a few photos on Facebook, mostly of the exhibit, the crowd, Dylan holding his certificate. I didn't tag anyone. I didn't have to. The photos would find their way to the people who needed to see them. That's how our family worked. Cold, detached, but deeply invested in perception. They'd see it. And they'd know. I didn't post the award announcement screen. But I did post one photo, Dylan standing in front of Winter Mouth, arms crossed, smiling the tiniest bit, with the plaque underneath reading Elizabeth Rainford Mentorship Award. The caption? "He didn't need anyone's permission to shine." Within hours, the likes started rolling in. Old friends. Acquaintances. A few of Dylan's former teachers. Even Nathaniel, my ex, commented, "So proud of him." And of you. But not a word from my parents. Sybil posted nothing that day. But the next time I saw her name pop up, she had liked the photo. She never messaged. Never called. But that tiny, pathetic like on a photo she'd mocked in person? That was a new kind of silence. And somehow, I cherished it more than applause. The days that followed were calm on the surface but quietly electric underneath. Dylan was lighter, more at ease. He began sketching more often at the kitchen table instead of hiding in his room. His drawings changed, too. There was more color, more movement. The loneliness that once hung over his art like fog had lifted, just a little. It wasn't gone, but it was changing. At school, a few teachers congratulated him. One even offered to set up a small display in the main office, something temporary to highlight the local talent. Dylan shrugged when he told me, but I saw how his ears flushed red with quiet pride. He never said it out loud, but I could tell, he felt seen, and that changed everything. As for me, I waited. I waited for the other shoe to drop. And it did. In the form of my mother. It was a Thursday morning when I got her call. I was restocking a shelf at my shop, Wilcox Paper and Ink, a boutique stationery store I'd been running for the past 8 years, and the phone buzzed on the counter. Mom, I stared at it for a second. I hadn't spoken to her since I sent the exhibit invitation. Not a call, not a text, not even a forwarded link to an article like she sometimes did when she was trying to keep in touch without actually talking. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. "Hello?" There was a pause. A breath. Then her voice, tight and clipped, like always. "I saw the pictures." I didn't say anything. "Your father and I were surprised to see you sponsored that award," she added. "Is that what you've been using your money for?" I blinked. "Yes," I said. "It's called supporting my son." Another pause. Longer. "It was a nice event," she said, cautiously. I suppose Dylan did well. I leaned against the counter, phone wedged between my shoulder and ear. "You suppose?" "Well, we weren't there, Renee." "I know. That was your choice." She sighed sharply. "It's not that we didn't want to go, don't lie," I cut in. "You said it was a waste of time." "I heard you." Silence again. I could hear the rustle of papers in the background, the clinking of her spoon against her tea mug. I could picture it perfectly, her sitting at the kitchen table, phone in one hand, tea in the other, still trying to control the narrative after all these years. Well, she said finally, I suppose you proved us wrong. There was no warmth in it. No apology. Just a resignation. That tiny, hollow admission that they had underestimated their own grandson. I wasn't trying to prove anything, I said. I just showed up. Like a parent is supposed to. I see. And that was that. She didn't ask about the painting. She didn't ask how Dylan felt. She didn't ask anything, really. She just wanted to acknowledge the event like it was a box she could check off. Now that it had been seen by people who mattered to her, colleagues, distant relatives, the women from her book club, she felt obliged to acknowledge it. I hung up soon after. No anger, no yelling. Just release. The kind that feels like setting down a heavy bag you didn't realize you'd been carrying for years. But Sybil wasn't done yet. 3 days after the exhibit, she showed up at my store. She never visited the shop. Not once. Not in the entire 8 years I'd been running it. And yet, there she was, hair sleek, trench coat pristine, standing at the counter like she belonged there. The bell above the door jingled lightly, and I looked up from my register. Sybil, I said slowly. You're a long way from your high-end office. She gave a tight smile. I was in the neighborhood. Sure. She glanced around, eyes landing briefly on the wall of handmade cards, the imported fountain pens, the wax seals and calligraphy kits. It's quaint in here. I said nothing. She cleared her throat. I wanted to talk. About? The exhibit. Of course. Sybil approached the counter but didn't lean on it. She stood like someone about to deliver bad news. I didn't know you were the sponsor, she said, her voice light, but her eyes tight. You weren't supposed to, I replied. It wasn't about me. She bit the inside of her cheek. A habit from childhood. A tell. I said some things that night. Before the awards. Oh, I know, I said. I heard you. Her eyes flashed, and for a moment, the mask cracked. You heard me? I nodded. Every word. No real talent in the bloodline, wasn't it? Charming, really. She looked down, then back up. It wasn't personal. I almost laughed. Of course it was. You've been making it personal since we were kids. Her mouth opened, then closed again. No defense came. I didn't come here to fight, she said finally. I came to acknowledge that maybe I was wrong. About Dylan. That word again. Maybe. He's very talented, she continued, voice forced, like each word cost her pride. I was impressed. The painting. It was powerful. You said it was derivative. I said a lot of things, she snapped, then quickly softened. I was wrong. It wasn't a full apology. It wasn't even close. But from Sybil? It was a chisel hitting granite. I gave a small nod. Thank you. She straightened her purse on her shoulder. Isla was very taken with his work, you know. She asked me if she could start art lessons again. I smiled. That's wonderful. She paused, studying me. How did you know to keep pushing? When no one else did. I exhaled slowly. Because I'm his mother. And he's mine. She gave one last nod, then turned to leave. Just before the door closed behind her, she looked back. He's lucky to have you. I didn't say anything. She left before I could respond. But that night, as I sat across from Dylan while he added shadows to a new sketch, I thought about her words. Maybe he was lucky to have me. But I was luckier to have him. And for the first time in a very long time, that felt like enough. That night passed without fanfare, but something shifted. Quiet, like a tide changing under moonlight. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was clawing my way to be seen by the people who should have always seen me. My hands were steady. My chest wasn't tight. I slept like a woman who had finally dropped the weight of generational expectation off her shoulders. But life, as always, has its final tricks. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Mrs. Ramirez, the head of the Albany Youth Art Collective. She asked if I'd be willing to speak at a panel for local parents, mothers who raised creatives, a small community event hosted in collaboration with a local college. I hesitated at first, but Dylan heard the conversation and looked up from his sketchpad. You should do it, he said. I blinked. Really? You always show up for me. Maybe it's time for you to show up. So I said yes. The event was hosted at the College of St. Rose, in a cozy, sunlit room filled with folding chairs and cafe lights strung along the walls. I didn't dress up. I wore jeans, a soft sweater, and a necklace Dylan had made me from polished stones when he was 8. The other panelists were impressive, one mother whose daughter had danced with Alvin Ailey, another whose son had composed for an indie film. I was the least polished, the least scripted. But when it was my turn to speak, I told the truth. I think we have this idea that talent needs to be measurable, I said. Medals. Trophies. Ivy League letters. But some gifts are quieter. They need space. Stillness. The kind of patience that doesn't come with applause. I spoke about Dylan, about the night of the exhibit, about what it meant to support someone when no one else does. The room was still when I finished. Some nodded. A few even wiped their eyes. Afterward, a reporter from a local arts magazine approached me. She said she'd like to do a piece on parents behind young artists, and asked if I'd be willing to be interviewed, maybe even include photos of Dylan's work. I agreed, as long as Dylan was okay with it. He was. The article ran 2 weeks later. It was modest, just a 4-page spread with soft lighting and honest quotes. They included a photo of Winter Mouth and a brief write-up of Dylan's award and the program. My quote about quiet talent made the pull quote section. What I didn't expect was what followed. 2 weeks later, my mother called again. This time, she panicked. Did you send this article to the Brinsons? She asked. What? I was confused. No. I haven't spoken to them in years. Well, they saw it. The Arts magazine. It was passed around at a book club. Now everyone's talking about your store and Dylan and, she paused, and your panel. I blinked. Why is that a problem? She sighed. Because Sybil was upset. People kept asking why she didn't sponsor Isla's music scholarship when you apparently funded one for art. She said you blindsided her. I almost laughed. Blindsided her with what? Encouraging my son? Renee, it's complicated, she said, exasperated. No, I said, calmly. It's not. You all spent years talking about who achieved what and when. You wanted to count every gold star like a scoreboard. But you never stopped to ask what mattered to any of us. She was silent on the line. I didn't sponsor that award to show off. I did it because no one else was showing up for him. Not you. Not Dad. And certainly not Sybil. There was a long, thin pause. Isla's taking art lessons now, she said finally, as if trying to steer the conversation toward safer ground. I'm glad, I replied. Maybe she'll find her own voice, too. She didn't call again after that. Not for a while. But here's where the real revenge happened. Quiet. Satisfying. Delicious. The article got more attention than I expected. A local gallery owner contacted Dylan's art teacher, asking if Dylan might be willing to submit to a youth art showcase the following season. That led to another opportunity, an online feature, followed by a request for a commission. And then, one Friday morning, Dylan got a letter. From an arts high school in New York City. They'd seen the magazine. They'd reviewed his work. And they were offering him a full scholarship for their summer intensive, a program that sent many of its graduates to RISD, Pratt, Cooper Union. He looked at the letter for a long time. Then he handed it to me and said, I guess we're going to the city. I drove him down that July, stayed in a cheap but clean Airbnb in Brooklyn, and cried into my pillow the first night because I couldn't believe he was going to be okay. Really, truly okay. Without the need for anyone's permission. Without chasing my family's approval. But what made it really perfect? A few months later, Sybil reached out to a mutual friend who ran a social committee for a regional arts and culture fundraiser, one of those events where wealthy suburbanites sip wine and donate money in return for social capital. She wanted to join the board. Wanted to support youth creativity, she said. But here's the twist. That same mutual friend? She was the one who'd sat in the audience at the parent panel. The one who'd heard every word. The one who'd told me afterward how deeply it hit her, how she wished someone had fought for her like that when she was young. So when Sybil reached out? The friend politely declined her application. Said they were prioritizing people with demonstrated investment in underserved youth arts programs. And then sent her a link to the article featuring me and Dylan. I didn't hear it from Sybil. I heard it through the grapevine. She'd been livid. Said it was completely unfair that her sister's story was being used to gatekeeper opportunities. I laughed for a long time. Because that wasn't gatekeeping. That was a mirror. She just didn't like what she saw in it. And that? That was my revenge. Soft. Satisfying. No screaming. No fights. Just a slow, painful realization that while she and my parents dismissed and diminished us for years, I was busy building something that mattered. Not for recognition. Not for status. But for the one person who needed it most. My son. And the best part? He's just getting started.